Denzel Washington walked into an upscale restaurant in wrinkled clothes and was subtly turned away for looking out of place. But just minutes later, the entire restaurant fell silent, realizing they had just insulted one of the most powerful figures behind the very place they were standing in. On the brightly lit streets of Beverly Hills, where neon lights bounce off luxury cars, designer handbags are as common as coffee cups, and reservations are made weeks in advance, a man stepped through the door. No entourage, no flashy suit, just a rumpled shirt, faded jeans, and scuffed shoes. That man was Denzel Washington. No one recognized him. No one welcomed him. Instead, a hostess squinted at him from head to toe, smirked, and said coldly, "Are you sure you're in the right place? This isn't a corner diner." The words, though soft, landed like a slap in the face, right in the most exclusive restaurant in town. And that marked the beginning of a chain of events no one at Lumiere could have foreseen. Have you ever wondered what you would do if someone famous or powerful walked into your life without the glow of fame? Would you dismiss them because of how they dressed? Could a single moment of judgment, a single condescending glance, bring an entire high society institution to its knees? Tonight's story isn't just about a dinner. It's about a costly lesson. The lights of Beverly Hills have never stopped dazzling. Cobblestone streets curve past designer storefronts and Michelin-starred restaurants, places where just setting foot inside makes you feel like you belong to a different class. But right in the heart of that glamorous, curated world, something happened that made the entire city whisper. It was a peaceful Saturday evening. Lumiere, the crown jewel of Beverly Hills' fine dining scene, had just begun its dinner service for a room full of VIPs when the thick glass doors suddenly opened. A black man stepped in. Sapa, Taubay, calm demeanor. But his outfit, worn jacket, faded jeans, scuffed leather shoes, clashed hard with the luxury around him. No one recognized him. Not at first. No one realized that the man dressed like a working-class passerby was actually Denzel Washington, a living legend of the silver screen, a multiple-time Oscar winner. But tonight, he wasn't here as a star. No driver, no bodyguards. No reservation. Just a man looking to enjoy a quiet meal like any regular person. But in a place where appearances are valued more than dignity, his normal was quickly mistaken for unworthy. Ashley, one of the restaurant's senior servers, was the first to approach. Her face was ice cold, lips curling into a condescending smirk. "Good evening, sir," she said, skepticism lacing her voice. "Are you sure you're in the right place? This is Lumiere, not some fast food joint around the corner." Denzel didn't flinch. He simply smiled and nodded. "I know exactly where I am. I'd like to have dinner here, if there's a table available." His calm response only fueled the assumptions in Ashley's eyes. She didn't know who he was, but she knew one thing for sure. This man didn't belong in a place like this. And then, as if on cue, the eyes of the dining room began to follow him. A quiet ripple of judgment began to rise, a swell of suspicion, of whispered evaluations. Little did they know, they were moments away from witnessing a reversal no one could have scripted better. Even in Hollywood, Lumiere was more than just a restaurant. It was a symbol of exclusivity, a stage where A-list celebrities came to make an impression, where billion-dollar deals were signed over glasses of red wine and dishes plated like works of art. From the warm golden light reflecting off crystal glasses to the soft notes of a grand piano drifting from the corner, every detail was meticulously curated to convey one message. This place was only for those deemed worthy. That evening, the restaurant was nearly full. A power couple discussed truffle risotto at a window-side table. A group of influencers live-streamed a flambéed Wagyu steak as flames danced inches from their phones. In the middle of that glossy tableau, The arrival of Denzel Washington, with his utterly unassuming appearance, looked like a stroke of the wrong color on a flawless oil painting. Ashley, the server assigned to him, was the type to size people up by their looks. Her hair tightly tied in a high bun, her wrinkle-free uniform, and her polished but condescending smile made her the perfect product of an environment where everything was measured in Gucci, Rolex, and the number of zeros in your bank account. The moment she laid eyes on Denzel, Ashley instantly classified him as someone out of place. No tie, no reservation, no entourage. To her, he was just another customer who didn't quite make the cut. "We do have a few open tables," she said, her voice light as air but sharp as a razor, "though I'm afraid our menu might be a little out of reach for certain guests." Denzel said nothing. He simply smiled, eyes calm, unbothered. Not a flicker of offense, no sign of discomfort. He followed Ashley as she led him through the dining room, past the shimmering chandeliers and whispered conversations, toward the worst table in the house, next to the kitchen door under dim lights, where the clatter of dishes and kitchen chatter filled the air. No one recognized who he was. Everyone was too caught up in their own reflections of light and luxury. But a few eyes had started to notice. Among them, an elderly couple in the back corner, and a young bartender who'd just caught a glimpse of something oddly familiar about this quiet, unassuming guest. No one knew it yet, but beneath the surface of that elegant stillness, a storm was silently gathering, and when it broke, it would sweep away every illusion of refined class this place so desperately clung to. When Ashley returned to take his order, her irritation was barely concealed. She stood stiffly, arms crossed, head tilted to the side, like she was bracing herself to endure a troublesome customer. "Have you looked over the menu yet?" she asked, her tone dripping with thinly veiled sarcasm. Denzel looked up gently, his gaze calm. "I'll have the beef rossini and a glass of red." "Your best vintage," Ashley blinked. The rossini was one of the priciest dishes on the menu, $350 a plate, not including wine. She hesitated for a split second, then let out a mocking chuckle, covering her mouth as if to hide the scorn. "Are you sure about that?" she said, louder this time, making sure the nearby tables could hear. "I just want to make sure you've seen the price." Denzel's face didn't change. "I'm sure. Thank you." His composure only made Ashley more irritated. She pulled out her order pad and scribbled with such force the pen nearly tore through the page. "We also have a mandatory 20% gratuity policy," she added, her voice icy. "I hope that's not going to be an issue." Denzel tilted his head slightly. Not an issue at all. The response was so courteous, it felt like a counterblow. Ashley spun on her heels, high heels clicking angrily against the floor as she muttered, "Just wait. He'll pay when the bill comes." At the bar, a young staff member had been quietly watching the entire exchange. He shook his head, sympathy etched into his face. Meanwhile, in the corner, the elderly couple exchanged a glance. The wife whispered, "Terrible attitude. But that man, do you see? He hasn't lost his temper." Time passed. Ashley deliberately delayed Denzel's main course. She laughed and smiled at the wealthy tables in the center of the room, passing by Denzel's table repeatedly without so much as a glance. Even when the beef rossini was ready and waiting under the kitchen heat lamp, she left it there for nearly 10 minutes while she entertained a regular at the bar. Still, Denzel remained at his table, unmoved. No complaint, no impatience. He simply observed, his eyes still as a pond, but with something unmistakably clear beneath the surface. He knew exactly what was going on. When the dish was finally brought to his table, set down with just enough force to send the plate sliding slightly, Ashley leaned in and murmured, "Hope this isn't beyond your palate." Denzel smiled. "If there's anything amiss, I'll let you know." "Thank you." Ashley walked away, but this time, she felt dozens of eyes follow her, no longer with the admiration she was used to, but with suspicion and distant judgment. What she didn't know was that in just a few short minutes, the entire world inside Lumiere was about to be turned upside down. Denzel Washington remained seated in the quietest corner of the restaurant, his fingers gently interlaced, eyes occasionally gliding over the menu as if rereading a familiar poem. The dinner went on in silence, but the air around him had shifted. No longer indifferent, no longer detached. Ashley, her face still cold, wooden tray in hand, approached again, this time carrying the main course. She placed the plate down with deliberate force. The fork slid slightly off the dish, clinking sharply against the table's edge, a jarring sound that cut through the otherwise hushed ambiance. "Filet de bœuf Rossini," she said flatly. "Hope it suits your taste," emphasizing the word "your" with unmistakable sarcasm. Without waiting for a reply, she spun around and walked away. From a table near the bar, a middle-aged couple paused mid-dessert. The woman leaned in, whispering, "Did you see how she treated him?" The husband nodded, brows furrowed. "It's getting out of hand." Not far off, another waiter named Kyle, barely a year into the job, stood frozen behind the service counter, having witnessed the whole exchange. His eyes flicked from Denzel to Ashley, who had just returned to the prep station. She was pouring water, her expression still icy. Kyle swallowed hard. "Ash, don't you think you're going a bit too far?" "He hasn't done anything wrong," Ashley scoffed, making no effort to hide the disdain in her voice. "Don't be naive. People like him come here to fantasize. Better they face reality early than embarrass themselves later." Meanwhile, Denzel continued calmly savoring each bite of his steak. He said nothing, looked at no one, but by now every eye in the room was drawn to him. An elderly gentleman near the window raised his wine glass in a quiet salute. Denzel returned the gesture with a soft smile, not flashy, but warm, a smile that carried quiet gratitude. It seemed as though Denzel was handling everything with remarkable composure, but his silence only made the tension more palpable. Who was this man, truly? Why did he command such presence without even trying? And, more importantly, people began to wonder, are we on the right side of this? The atmosphere inside Lumiere had turned dense, heavy, as if the entire restaurant was holding its breath, waiting for something inevitable to break. The soft clinking of cutlery gradually faded as every gaze in Lumiere slowly turned toward one direction. The shadowed corner table where Denzel Washington sat, calm and composed. No one knew who he was. Not yet. But there was something undeniable in his presence that made indifference impossible. Ashley, sensing the shifting attention toward the strange guest, grew increasingly irritated. She approached Denzel with a freshly brewed espresso, but instead of placing it gently, she set it down with a thud, like a challenge. "Black coffee? No sugar. Fits the frugal kind of taste, doesn't it?" She smirked, loud enough for the nearby tables to catch every word. Denzel looked up, his gaze still serene, though his brow lifted slightly. He was about to respond when Ashley cut him off, no longer bothering to hide her disdain. "Honestly, are you sure you understand the prices here? Because your tab is already pushing $500. A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. A woman at a nearby table shook her head, clearly unimpressed. The older gentleman by the window now stood, leaning on his cane, his expression one of disbelief. Denzel gently set the cup down, lifted his chin, and spoke, his voice low, but every word razor-sharp. "I never thought that a place considered the pinnacle of fine dining could harbor such shallow service." Ashley froze, lips parted, but speechless. And then, a new voice rang out, firm, unmistakable, Mr. Paul. Also told for us. Washington. Please accept our deepest apologies for this disgraceful welcome. The entire restaurant went still. From behind the bar, a sharply dressed man in a black suit stepped forward. Nathan DuPont, general manager of Lumiere. His face had gone pale the moment he recognized Denzel Washington, not just a Hollywood icon, but one of the restaurant's founding strategic investors. Ashley stood paralyzed. Denzel leaned slightly in his chair, but his gaze had lost its gentleness. I came here hoping for a quiet dinner. No cameras, no recognition. But it seems sometimes it takes darkness for the truth to be seen. His words sliced through the silence like a blade. The room erupted, not with noise, but with the kind of electricity that fills the air just before a storm. Gasps, whispers, and stunned glances now converged not on Denzel, but on Ashley. The tides had turned. Completely, Nathan DuPont walked briskly toward the table, his expression caught somewhere between panic and deep remorse. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. Denzel Washington, the powerful investor he'd only met once during the restaurant's grand opening, now sitting quietly in a wrinkled coat, treated like an outsider. Mr. Washington, I sincerely apologize for everything that has just happened, Nathan said, bowing his head, each word deliberate and heavy with shame. The entire restaurant fell into a breathless silence. Ashley stepped back, her footing unsteady, as if the ground had shifted beneath her. She looked at Denzel, the man she had pegged as just another broke guy in cheap clothes, now being addressed with deference by the general manager himself. Denzel didn't rise. He merely lifted his gaze, locking eyes with Ashley. His voice was low, but it echoed through the hush like a command. I didn't come here as a celebrity. I didn't ask for red carpets. I simply wanted to see if Lumiere, the restaurant I once believed in enough to invest, still upheld its founding spirit, service, with respect. He turned to Nathan, and I regret to say this, that spirit has been lost. Starting with looks like that. Ashley stammered, I didn't know. I just thought, you thought I was who? Denzel interrupted for the first time that night, his voice edged with steel. Someone who couldn't afford dinner? Someone unworthy of being here because I'm not wearing Armani? She lowered her head. Her whole body trembled. Denzel stood up, tall, commanding beneath the soft amber light. He looked around the room at all the guests, frozen in stunned silence. Ladies and gentlemen, I didn't come here seeking bows, but ask yourselves this. If I had been the poor man you assumed, would this treatment have been any more acceptable? Several guests averted their eyes. The elderly gentleman from earlier gave a solemn nod of respect. Nathan, regaining composure, turned to the entire staff. I'm requiring all staff on the evening shift to remain after close. We need to have an emergency meeting. Then, to Ashley, and you, effective immediately. Step away from service. Denzel moved out from the dining area, slowly, with calm yet undeniable presence. Along the way, several guests rose instinctively, nodding in apology or reverence. Ashley remained frozen by the wall, a chill running down her spine as the realization struck her hard. The man she had dismissed wasn't just any diner. He was one of the owners of the very place she worked. After the restaurant closed for the night, the golden lights of Lumiere dimmed to just enough to illuminate the faces gathered in the staff meeting room. Every employee from the evening shift was present, from the head chef and servers to the glass washers. They sat in silence, tense and uncertain. Denzel Washington entered without need for introduction or formality. He took a seat at the head of the table, met by dozens of eyes locked onto him. He began to speak, his voice calm but sharp as a blade. You know who I am, but tonight I didn't come here as an actor. I came as a customer, only to be treated like an outsider, simply because I didn't look like someone you believe belongs here. No one spoke. The silence was so heavy, you could hear a pin drop. His eyes turned to Ashley, now seated at the far end of the table, clutching her skirt with trembling hands, eyes red from holding back tears. "Miss Ashley," Denzel said, not with anger, but with the quiet weight of deep disappointment. "Do you know how many people out there have been turned away simply because they weren't dressed a certain way? How many walked into a restaurant hoping only to be treated with dignity, only to leave ashamed because of one server's arrogance?" Ashley nodded slightly, voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think it would go this far." "That's the problem," Denzel replied. "You didn't think. You assumed kindness is reserved for the wealthy and well-dressed. But a fine restaurant doesn't have to come with a cheap heart." He turned to the entire team. Lumiere isn't a place to showcase power. It was built to create an experience for anyone brave enough to walk through that door. We don't just sell food. We serve respect. The room grew heavier. Many looked down. A few of the younger staff discreetly wiped away tears. Denzel continued. "I don't expect perfection. We all make mistakes. But the question is, what do you learn from them? What if tonight it had been someone else, someone with less patience than I have? What then? A complaint? A viral takedown online? Or worse, a guest lost forever?" He looked each person in the eye. "I'm not firing anyone tonight, but starting tomorrow, we're changing things." He turned to Nathan DuPont, the general manager. "I want a full retraining program on guest service launched immediately. And I'll be teaching the first session myself." Nathan nodded without hesitation. Denzel concluded, "From now on, remember this. Never judge anyone by the clothes they wear, because sometimes the person you look down on is the one who could change your entire life." A week after that fateful staff meeting, Lumiere felt like an entirely new place. The tables near the kitchen, once reserved for guests deemed unfitting, were now dressed with scented candles, silk tablecloths, and delicate glass vases. There were no more distinctions between VIP and discreet seating. Every guest was welcomed with the same standard: genuine hospitality. Denzel Washington no longer appeared as the quiet, anonymous diner. He had become a strategic advisor for the very restaurant he'd invested in. He didn't bark orders, nor did he manage operations. But every afternoon, he would stop by a small corner near the bar and simply observe, watching everything from the way a server smiled at a guest to the quiet glance of the busser wiping down a table. Ashley, the one who once looked at people with judgment, had become the very face of transformation. She personally apologized to each co-worker, wrote a handwritten letter to Denzel, and even requested to join the guest service training he was now leading. She began again from the ground up, learning to listen, to serve, and above all, to see a person's worth beyond their appearance. One Friday afternoon, a group of students entered Lumiere in simple school uniforms. In the past, they might have been stopped at the door under suspicious stares, but this time, it was Ashley who stepped forward to greet them. "Hi there, welcome to Lumiere. Your table's all ready, and guess what? We've got complimentary salted caramel cake for first-time guests today." The kids beamed with joy, and one parent standing behind them quietly wiped away a tear. Not because of the dessert, but because of how her child was welcomed like someone truly important. Nathan, the restaurant manager, had changed too. No longer driven solely by profit margins, he started spending time with staff after hours, hosting weekly meetings not to scold, but to listen to their stories. From the head chef to the valet, everyone now felt part of something greater, a place where kindness was the foundation. Lumiere didn't become the busiest restaurant in the city, but it became the one with the most returning guests. When a reporter asked Denzel why a luxury restaurant like Lumiere would shift away from its old image of pricey, posh elite, he simply smiled and replied, "Because I believe anyone can set a beautiful table, but a beautiful heart, that takes daily practice." Denver. Abafer, a dinner at a restaurant, a man in modest clothing, a judgmental glance, and then a twist that silenced the entire room. Today's story isn't just about Denzel Washington, a global star who walked into his own restaurant without flaunting his name. It's a story about how we judge one another, sometimes with just a glance, a shirt, or a seat too close to the kitchen. Lumiere was once a symbol of exclusivity, but that night, thanks to a moment of silence, a calm response, and one unveiled truth, it became a symbol of awakening. We can be wealthy, famous, or just an ordinary person stepping into a high-end space. But whoever we are, we all deserve to be treated with kindness. Remember, character isn't measured by a wallet. Status isn't printed on a reservation ticket. And a person's worth has never been defined by their appearance. If you've ever been judged because you didn't look the part, share your story in the comments, because maybe, just maybe, you're the next Denzel in someone else's story. I can data set. Ha gente. Thanks for watching. Don't forget, new stories drop regularly, still about life's quiet moments, but powerful enough to shift perspectives. Asambambiam or fiuiro deo. Asande da set. Asande. Subscribe if you believe. Kindness is a language everyone understands.